I'm curious, though, about here in this country. You know, there was a great deal of euphoria after the election, I would argue, at least among some people who run corporations, in the belief that tax reform is going to happen. We're going to get a lot, dereg, which is happening. But that seems to be tempered a bit. Here we are at 100 days, a little over that. Is that uncertainty creeping in terms of the decision making, or is it all, all good to go ahead?
Well, there's a lot that's out there from a potential policy perspective, and I think what you said is right. As we got past the election, there was a lot of conviction around the fact that all this policy activity was going to move forward, would be very good for asset prices, for market activity. And I think as we've gotten into the first quarter and the process of actually creating legislation and moving a bunch of this forward, complicated stuff. And so I think now people are more cautious about what's realistic that can get done, what will be the time frame under which it can get done, and people are going to have to watch this all very quickly. So I'd say some of the conviction that existed after the election in the fourth quarter, some of that conviction's faded here, but look, earnings have been pretty good.
Yeah.
The earnings cycle so far has been weighted to financials, industrials, the big tech, it's been pretty good. We still have a bunch of energy, consumer, REITs, that kind of stuff to go, but so far, so good. There's some very, very constructive policy discussion going on. I think investors are willing to kind of hang in there or watch this, but they'll have to watch very carefully. And if it seems like the legislative agenda can't move forward in a constructive way, it will start to affect, and to a greater degree, the way investors are feeling.
Right. But do you expect the capital markets activity is going to be picked up? Back to sort of a question that you might have answered in your old days as co-head of IB.
Capital markets activity has actually been pretty good. In the U.S. in particular, the capital markets activity has been pretty good. Now remember, we're coming off of a very, very slow, first quarter last year. We had a terrible first quarter, but leverage finance activity is up significantly, particularly with respect to floating rate instruments and loans, senior loans. I think that activity is up 250%, but even bond activity is up 100%. And when you look at that market, we're operating at close to kind of 2-year tights, so that market feels like it's operating pretty well. Equity activity, underwriting activity, IPO activity has also picked up, particularly in the US. It's been a little bit slower in Europe, but I think you can understand that between the election cycle that's running in Europe, that's maybe slowing that activity down, but equity activity is definitely up meaningfully. And look, M&A activity up 20%, nearly 20%, 18% year over year. That's still not the rate we saw in 2015.
15 was an incredible year for M&A. Finally, let me end sort of on that note, though. We don't know where things are going on tax reform, but there does seem to be a general consensus we're going to get some sort of repatriation deal at some point. What does that do? I mean, I would assume that's a real positive for your business, conceivably, if all that cash or a lot of it returns and has to be put to work in some manner.
Well, I think it's a positive. I think it's a positive for the markets. I think it's a positive for the economy here in the U.S. A bunch of that capital is going to get returned. A bunch of that capital will be invested in a different context, so it creates activity, and our business obviously benefits, when activity is created. It'd be a very, very constructive thing, but it's something we'll have to watch and see how things develop with everything else that we're watching in this tax plan.
Exactly.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.